What separates marketing fibbery from scientific dishonesty? How technically truthful do camera makers like Panasonic need to be about the functionality of their cameras? Is Panasonic perpetrating a fraud? Or is it just telling a little white lie that having 32-bit float audio in their new GH7 camera will, to quote, record more information and, to quote, there's no need for tedious sound level adjustments during audio recording? Should we say caveat emptor if you spend $500 for an XLR adapter, believing that 32-bit float recording means you no longer have to worry about audio settings? Now I've put a link in the description to an essay that explains why 32-bit float doesn't do what Panasonic claims, or anyone else. Now you don't have to agree with me that it doesn't work. Let's leave the question for another day. Or you can watch some of my older videos. Anyway, I would hope we all agree, if we're being honest, that most cameras aren't sold for what they do, but for what the buyer believes they will do. Now, recently, Gerald Undone did a rant video essentially complaining that Panasonic didn't invite him to a camera event because he called the Lumix camera strange. That's a very mild criticism, don't you agree? It's not even close to my statement that Panasonic is lying about the GH7 camera's capabilities. Anyway, he felt that Panasonic was throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. That Panasonic, in taking out its displeasure with him, was inhibiting his ability to do more creative videos that would sell more products, though he doesn't say that explicitly. I don't believe anyone would disagree with Gerald's sentiments. However, Gerald is only looking at one end of the equation, the camera seller. The other end is his audience, the camera buyer. If they demanded more critical videos from Gerald, wouldn't Panasonic have to respect their desire? After all, he has 500,000 followers. It's the buyer who ultimately determines who makes money in the camera business. But there's a problem. Gerald's audience is often motivated by a God complex. They want new special powers. Now bear in mind, I'm not looking down on them. That's certainly what I wanted when I first got into photography 50 years ago, and would just look at the ads in Popular Photography magazine for hours on end while in bed. And these desires can still motivate me to buy a camera today. So I'm sympathetic that the last thing anybody wants when buying a camera is to make them feel more, if they're buying the camera to make them feel more powerful, is to be told they're actually pathetic and weak. For someone to insinuate they're a sucker. So Gerald's rant works well in that he calls to account the seller, Panasonic, but leaves the buyer's sense of superiority alone. Where the rubber meets the road, Gerald wants viewers to watch advertising on his channel so he can make a living. I understand that. Panasonic naturally wants as many buyers as possible. What Gerald chafes at is Panasonic drawing the line of where Gerald can make critical comments or not. Further, although guys buying cameras for the God complex subconsciously know that they're doing it, they need some objectivity to feed their reasoning about why they need the camera. They need someone like Gerald to stand between them and the seller as an objective buyer's helper, a kind of broker. And one can only be truly objective if they look at some of the bad with the good. Put another way, Gerald Undone wouldn't survive if all he did was parrot the marketing materials of the cameras. He points this out in the video, and of course it's true. He needs to give the buyers, his viewers, an objective reason to buy that includes both good and bad. On the other hand, if he doesn't come clean about, he wouldn't survive if he questions the buyer's reasonings for buying a camera. The question I ask you, how far do you believe Gerald will go in objectively explaining why something might not work in a camera? Again, the more negative he is, the more he'll get in the way of a person's rationalizing their camera purchase. Yet the less critical he is, the more trust he will lose from his audience. Where does he draw the line? I think we all know. If Gerald were to look at this video and do a response where he says that Panasonic is indeed lying when they say 32-bit float removes clipping, do you believe he would ever be invited to one of their events again? He wouldn't. And how would he feed his family then? Further, many in his audience who bought or want to buy the camera would not applaud his honesty. No good deed goes unpunished. It kills the camera shopping vibe. They'll unsubscribe because no matter how true it is that he hasn't criticized them directly, they will feel it nonetheless. There's no money in criticism. On that, I am an expert. The simple truth is Gerald Undone is a captive of the lies between the sellers and the buyers of camera equipment, the lies they tell each other. Returns to the question of fraud on the part of Panasonic about 32-bit float, why would they do it? I believe the mirrorless camera industry is oversaturated with manufacturers and product. This isn't news to anyone. Now comes a perfect storm of inflation, driving camera prices higher, and recession, less people with jobs to pay for cameras. And these forces will only get worse, I believe. The camera Grim Reaper is walking the halls of Olympus and Panasonic. Except for Sony these days, none of the camera makers are immune. Although I believe there are many good use cases for the MFT format, businesses aren't charities. In 2015, Samsung killed their whole mirrorless camera division. And, their cameras got very good reviews. We have to keep in mind that Panasonic, like Samsung, is a deep conglomerate with many business lines. Indeed, I wouldn't be surprised if Panasonic considers shutting down Lumix, every year or so. But we don't know their financials. We may look at cameras as a be-all and end-all, but to Panasonic, I doubt they add much to their net profits. The people marketing at Lumix understand, so they're doing everything they can to sell more cameras. Gerald Undone only sees their boorish behavior. I don't believe he understands how desperate they are, and how desperate he is becoming too, because he is part of the same business. Maybe I'm wrong on this. From Panasonic's point of view, better to sell a few XLR adapters with the promise of 32-bit float magic, which some like me might criticize, than go out of business entirely. These are hard decisions. Like Gerald, I don't believe Panasonic is playing this well, but I'm not seeing things from their point of view. The main point I want you to understand is that to get the technical aspects of video or photography, you can't trust Gerald Undone and his peers to tell you how cameras really work. It's not that they don't want to tell you the truth, it's just that they can't. Neither the manufacturer wants to hear it, or the audience wants to hear it. So for the very few that really want to know how the truth is, you have to come to small YouTube channels or people like me, or read the technical literature in detail and really work it out in your head what's going on. Anyway, till next time, thanks for watching.